A culture is only as good as its morals. A government only as good as its God. Democracy, monarchy, socialism, communism, anarchy, which of these is the best? Clearly, one would say democracy, right? Well, is it really? Why do we think that it's better? The reason is because it provides the best protection against evil if made correctly. But even democracy eventually turns to chaos if and when morals are lost. Because without morals, you have no basis for truth. Without truth, you have no basis for justice. And without justice, you have no basis for freedom. Let's take a trip throughout history and see 6 different examples of where freedom was gained and then either held or lost. Starting off with the 1776 revolution of the American colonies. Sparking from the tyranny of Britain, this gave us the United States of America, which was based on great principles of freedom and Christian values. In fact, if you go to Plymouth now, you will see the biggest granite monument in the U.S., which is the Monument to the Forefathers. This depicts 5 figures, 4 of which, around the base, morality, education, liberty, and law. The 5th, above them all, is faith. This showed that what the forefathers originally intended was for America to be based on faith. And as we can see now, that freedom has lasted. The next rebellion, a period of short-lived freedom, is 1789, the French Revolution. They also sparked from the tyranny of the monarchs before them. However, they were based on the god of reason, which was basically an atheistic worldview disguised as being reasonable. And this led to death, anarchy, a complete loss of that freedom, and ultimately the rise of such leaders as Napoleon in the War of 1812, other things like that. So that, because it was not based on Christian morals, ended up causing death and chaos. Next would be the revolution, the rebellion of Texas in 1836. This was based on freedom. The leaders, such as Sam Houston, such as those at the Alamo, they based their lives on gaining liberty from the tyranny of the Mexican Empire. Now, while not all of the people living in Texas at the time followed a biblical worldview, the leaders at least had founded Texas, the Republic of Texas, on a biblical Christian moral base. And thus they did well until eventually they merged with the U.S., or rather the U.S. merged with Texas. And now Texas is still free, if not the freest state in America. This shows that morals lead to freedom. 4th is the revolution in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, where communism was given rise. This was supposedly based on freedom from the tyranny of the Empire of Russia before. However, again, it was based on an atheistic view. If anything, with government as its god. Government will solve all our problems, they said. However, as Ronald Reagan would say, government is not the solution, it is the problem. So this ultimately caused suffering, death, and while it was based on great ideals, if communism were in a perfect world, it would be the best government. They had no morals. It was not a perfect world, and thus it led to the worst that it could be. Another example is Israel. Now, this might not seem like a revolution or a rebellion where great freedom was won, but after they separated from Egypt, they had kind of swings of freedom and chaos, of peace and destruction, and this was because they either were following the laws of God or they were trying to make their own laws. They were trying to create a new moral standard that didn't really work. Israel, when they were following a good moral base, had great peace and prosperity, but when they were not, led to war and destruction. Ultimately, when they finally separated themselves from God, they were taken over, they split into a civil war, and they were taken over by the Assyrians and the Babylonians. This leads us to the final of these 6 periods of freedom, which is now. Right now, we have great freedom, at least in America. However, without the intervention of the church, without morals being gained, we are losing those morals because we are beginning to see the government as the solution, as in 1917, and we're beginning to lose, and we're beginning to serve reason, as in 1789. In fact, many describe our era as a post-truth era because we've lost morals and thus lost truth. As I stated before, the next thing to go will be justice and then ultimately freedom. And the problem is, the new generations are not being taught the history of such things as 1789 and 1917. And as Churchill said, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So while we have freedom now, how long? How long will that be? Unless we protect that. As the Christian church, unless we intervene with the morals of our country, we will lose that very